Hello, and welcome to Of the People. I'm Robert Chernin. Thank you so much for joining us again. A turn of the head, or when saying sorry really just isn't good enough. So, post assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump, saved only literally by the turn of his head, there are still so many questions that are roaming all over the press. Kimberly Cheadle, she's the head of Secret Service, for her part, basically said, number one, the buck stops here. Number two, I'm sorry. And number three, I'm not quitting, which just again goes to show you that for the Democrats, there's no accountability and there is no consequences for failure. One has to ask themselves, would she have not resigned had the assassination attempt been successful, or is the only reason she hasn't resigned is because it was a failed assassination attempt, which we'll get to in a second. But there's so many questions here that really the American people need to be answered. The first is obviously line of sight. How the hell does someone get within 130 yards of the president in a direct line of sight in a in a Secret Service event? In a Secret Service event, when it's declared a Secret Service event, and that's an official thing like the Republican National Committee, what ends up happening is they secure the area, they sweep it days before, no one gets in or out, and they are responsible for coordinating all security at an event. RNC is like that, Republican National Committee, next month, the Democratic National Committee, they're all like that. So to now say, oh, it was the local police's fault because they dropped the ball, I guess when Ms. Cheadle says that the buck stops here, she wasn't really telling us the truth. So first is really the line of sight. And then the question then becomes, it's 130 yards, and the guy gets off 5 to 8 shots. I've heard different numbers, 5 or 8, but let's go with 5, which is the shorter number. How does he get off 5 to 8 shots before the Secret Service sniper takes them out? Oh, and why, after there was some 3-minute give or take overlap where they had him in their sights, why wouldn't they have taken him out then? The sniper was not given permission to take him out until after he shot. Why was that? I wonder. So, and then where were the drones? In any Secret Service event, there are drones. There's always drones. Where were they? So not only do you have part-time Secret Service agents guarding the former president, who were, I guess, Homeland Security employees, you have no drones. And then obviously the local police officer went up, saw him, and then came back down. Now, I've had people on the ground there. If you look over 130 yards, it's not that far. It's not like they were using a real sniper rifle, right? A sniper rifle, so defined, is really more like an AR-10, which would have a 7.62 load or a 308 load, maybe 800 yards out, or a Creedmoor 6.5. This was an AR-15. This was, in the parlance of rifles and long-range shooting, this is a baseball throw. And if you looked from the stage, you could see him over there. So I don't quite understand this. And everybody's now talking about, oh, the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, and it's like the Reagan shooting. No, it's nothing like either of those, because Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was assassinated by Sirhan at point blank range and shot in the back, right? Ronald Reagan was shot by John Hinckley Jr. in the front, almost point blank range as well. None of those were a long range shot. The only thing this is similar to was obviously the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Think Lee Harvey Oswald. And at this point, maybe we're talking about another Jack Ruby moment, because Oswald shoots Kennedy, Ruby shoots Oswald, no way to question the shooter. I forget the young kid's name, shoots Donald Trump, and then the snipers take him out afterwards. How convenient. Now you can't ask him any questions either. I'm not saying there's conspiracy, but there's an awful lot of questions here. So here's one of the differences, right? We have social media. Back in those days, we didn't have social media. So it reminds me of a line from Chico Marx of the Marx Brothers, like, who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes? I think most of us are going to believe our own eyes in all of this. But there's 2 other questions here that I really want to ask. Actually, one question. Does anybody really think that this 20-year-old kid outsmarted and outfoxed the Secret Service right in front of the Secret Service when he climbs up the ladder, right in front of the local police, and right in front of the attendees who were pointing that there was someone on the roof? So if anybody thinks that This young kid outsmarted the Secret Service. There's oceanfront property in, I don't know, pick it, Arizona that I'd like to sell you. It's just not possible. And now we have to rely on the FBI to do the investigation. And the problem is at least half the country, probably more, doesn't trust the FBI, and for good reason, to do an independent investigation. Right? These are the same people who promoted Russiagate. These are the same people who denied the Hunter Biden laptop, the same people who raided Trump's residence in Mar-a-Lago for classified documents, the same people who, planted or bugged his campaign office. Now, I'm not saying that this is a cover-up. I'm not even saying this is a conspiracy. What I'm saying is that there are a lot of questions that would lead a reasonable person, and most of the time I try to be reasonable, a reasonable person to be open to that possibility. The country needs to come together on this, but the country's only going to come together on this if we get fair and honest answers to those questions in an independent investigation. But we all know at this point, and if I had my tinfoil hat, I'd put it on. We all know at this point they are going to determine that the shooter acted alone, much like they denied, if you remember, the shooting at the congressional baseball game where Congressman Steve Scalise got shot by the shooter after he was, I guess they call him a domestic terrorist, but after he responded to Bernie Sanders' violent rhetoric. And the investigation came to, do you remember that one? Suicide by police, meaning that the guy wanted to die and therefore that's what he did. And that's not true. That's crap. So at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, a turn of the head, an act of God saved President Trump. And saying you're sorry really isn't good enough. We want answers. We want an honest investigation. And I think the country comes together on that. And the country deserves that. You want to start putting the country back together and uniting the country? Give us an honest investigation. And don't sweep it under the rug and tell me or anybody else that the shooter acted alone. Let the facts speak for themselves. And that's the monologue.